Hi, I'm Rebecca Hollis. I'm 41, a full-time anesthesiologist, and a full-time single mum. If you'd asked me last year what broke me the most in life, I would have said losing my husband, but I was wrong. What broke me was watching my 11-year-old daughter get slapped by her own grandmother, then called a black mistake in front of an entire family dinner. No one spoke up, not even my brother. And if you think this is one of those revenge stories, let me tell you, it's not just about fighting back. It's about learning that sometimes your real family is the one you protect, not the one you're born into. I grew up in a spotless house that never felt like home. Our backyard was trimmed like a military base, grass the same height, hedges squared off perfectly. Inside, it was just as controlled. White carpets, no loud voices, no mess. Ever. My dad, Martin Hollis, was a former military engineer who ran our home like a quiet war zone. He wasn't the yelling type, he was worse. He was the type who looked at you with disappointment so deep you wished he'd just scream instead. My mum, Teresa, was a homemaker. She baked, hosted ladies' brunches, and always looked like she stepped out of a catalogue. But if you spilled juice on her polished floors, her mouth would tighten like she was swallowing venom. She didn't believe in tantrums or emotions. Good girls don't cry, she'd say. They control themselves. I was an only child for 6 years. Then came my younger brother Ben, golden boy from birth. Where I got silence, he got praise. Where I got correction, he got celebration. I was the quiet one, the bookworm, the serious girl. And I wanted one thing, to make them proud. But no matter what I did, it was never quite enough. In 5th grade, I won a regional poetry contest. I was so proud I left the ribbon on the kitchen counter like a little gift. That night, my mum tossed it in the drawer with coupons and said, "Poems are sweet, but they won't pay the bills." By middle school, I stopped writing completely. By the time I reached high school, my whole identity revolved around pleasing them. I signed up for science clubs, took extra AP classes, never dated, never went out. They loved it when I said I wanted to go into medicine. Practical, my dad said. So I did. Not because I was passionate about it, but because being practical was the only way I was allowed to exist. I got into med school at 22. I didn't celebrate. My mom just nodded. See, discipline works. It wasn't love, it was strategy, and I was the product. You'd think that becoming a doctor would have finally made me feel seen, but all I felt was more invisible. At graduation, while my friends were hugging crying parents, mine stood in the back, clapping politely like they were at someone else's kid's wedding. That night, I overheard my dad tell another guest, "We always knew she'd go far. She was always the quiet one. Like I was a dog that learned new tricks. Nothing more." It took me years to realize I'd been raised inside a performance. Every smile, every nod, every "we're proud of you" was conditional. I didn't grow up loved. I grew up managed. I moved to Denver after residency, got a small apartment, took night shifts in anesthesia. I thought putting distance between us would bring peace. But you don't outrun ghosts by switching cities. They called sometimes, rarely, mostly holidays. The conversations were always stiff, always measured. They never asked how I was, just what I was doing. Still working nights, still alone. Love, to them, was like furniture, nice to look at, but don't get too comfortable. I didn't know how truly broken my idea of family was until I had a daughter of my own, but that's not for this chapter. All you need to know is this. When you grow up in a house where being perfect is more important than being loved, you don't notice the loneliness right away. It sneaks up on you, like hunger after skipping dinner. Quiet, numbing, slow. I didn't rebel. I didn't scream. I learned to smile when I was sad, to disappear when I was disappointed, to apologize when I wanted to cry. And I carried that into adulthood like it was part of me. But here's the thing about survival tactics. One day, when you become a mother, you realize you can't pass those things down. Not to a child, not to a little girl whose skin tone makes people stare, not to someone you'd give your life for, just to keep them safe. Christopher wasn't the kind of man you fell for in a single glance. He wasn't flashy, no Rolex, no smooth pickup lines, no big speeches. He was a quiet kind of strong. The kind of man who held the elevator door for a stranger and meant it. The kind who listened when you spoke, and not just to respond, but to understand. We met at a hospital fundraiser in downtown Denver. I'd just finished a 30-hour shift and looked like it too. I was sipping lukewarm coffee, barely awake, when I noticed a man standing in the corner, reading a book, not checking his phone, not networking, just reading. I don't even remember what made me walk over. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was fate. He glanced up and smiled. "Rough night?" he asked. I laughed. "You have no idea." That conversation lasted 3 hours. Christopher was a writer. He published poetry and essays, worked with non-profits, and taught writing workshops for kids. He was the first person who ever asked me what I really wanted, not what my parents expected of me. I told him I used to write as a kid. He said, "Then you're still a writer. You're just resting." No one had ever said something like that to me. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. Not evaluated, not corrected, just seen. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony by a lake. No big dress, no huge guest list, just love. My parents didn't come. I sent an invitation anyway, half out of hope, half out of habit. A week before the wedding, my mum called. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't say congratulations. She just said, "Is it true? You're marrying a black man?" When I said yes, the silence that followed was longer than any pause I'd ever heard from her. Then don't expect us to be part of this family anymore. We won't accept what you're choosing. That was the end of the call. It hurt more than I want to admit. Even though I'd grown used to their distance, I still hoped deep down they'd soften when they saw I was happy. But instead, they slammed the door harder. Christopher didn't say much. He just held my hand and said, "It's their loss, not yours." When I found out I was pregnant, we both cried. Happy tears. We painted the baby room together. Yellow walls, stars on the ceiling. We argued over names for weeks, then settled on Nia, which means purpose in Swahili. Christopher said it fit, and it did. But when I called my parents to tell them, nothing changed. My mum sent me a postcard that read, "I hope you're ready for the consequences of your decisions. This is your life now." That's all. No congratulations. No, "We'll be here if you need us." Just a thinly veiled, "You made your bed. Lie in it." And here's where I want to pause for a second, because I know some of you watching this, you've been there too. You've sat on the edge of your bed, holding a phone, staring at a message from someone who was supposed to love you unconditionally, and feeling that sting of being disowned for simply choosing happiness. Maybe it was your partner, your identity, your dreams, something that didn't fit the family mold. If you've ever been told, "We don't accept that here," drop A in the comments. I see you. You're not alone. Nia was born on a cold November morning. She came out wailing, tiny, fierce, and perfect. She had Christopher's deep brown eyes and the softest curls I'd ever seen. I held her against my chest, and I made a silent promise. No matter who left, no matter who judged, you will never wonder if you're wanted. The first 3 years were the happiest of my life. Christopher read to her every night, taught her how to hum along to jazz, made up bedtime stories about talking giraffes and moon landing dogs. He was the kind of father I never had until the night he collapsed. I still remember the way his coffee mug shattered against the floor, the ambulance ride, the waiting room, the doctor shaking his head. Massive cerebral aneurysm. I'm so sorry. Just like that, he was gone. I was 36, widowed and holding a 3-year-old who kept asking, "Where's Daddy?" I called my parents. I didn't even ask for money. I just asked if they could visit, just once, to meet Nia, to be part of what was left. 2 days later, an envelope arrived, no return address. Inside was a folded note in my mother's handwriting. "You chose this life. Don't drag us into it." That was the moment I stopped believing they would ever come around, not for me, not even for an innocent child. I stared at that note for a long time. Then I packed it into a shoebox labelled "Don't Open Again." And I focused on Nia. She became my reason, my world, my proof that something good can come out of deep rejection. And if my parents couldn't love her, then they never really loved me either. Next chapter. How a little girl with a spiral notebook and a broken heart wrote her way into the world's spotlight. And why some people only show up when you're finally shining. There's something about the sound of a child's footsteps on hardwood floors that makes a house feel alive. That little pitter-patter in the morning, before the coffee kicks in, before the grief has time to settle. For the first 3 years after Christopher passed, Nia's tiny feet were the only thing that reminded me I still had something to get up for. I worked night shifts at the hospital, came home at dawn, slept 3 or 4 hours, and tried to pretend I had it all together. But the truth was, I was barely functioning. There were nights when I'd cry in the bathroom with the water running so Nia wouldn't hear. Mornings when I'd sit in my car in the parking lot, just staring at the steering wheel, wondering how long I could keep this up. I wasn't just grieving a husband, I was grieving the life I thought we were building. I was grieving the idea that maybe, just maybe, I could finally have a real family, one that didn't judge or measure or control. But that dream died with Christopher, raising Nia alone. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and the most beautiful. She was too young to understand death, but not too young to feel the absence. She'd ask me, "When is Daddy coming back from the stars?" And I'd choke out some version of the truth that didn't break her. We kept a framed photo of him on her nightstand. Every night she'd kiss it and whisper, "Good night, Daddy." And every night I'd step out of her room and fall apart quietly in the hallway. What hurt more than anything wasn't just losing him, it was losing him alone. No one came to the funeral from my side of the family. No flowers, no card, no phone call, just silence, like he never existed, like our love wasn't real. I reached out. God knows I tried. I called, I emailed, I wrote letters. I even mailed pictures of Nia on her birthday, hoping they'd see the joy in her eyes and feel anything. Weeks passed, nothing. Then one day, a letter arrived. Small envelope, my mother's handwriting. For a brief second I thought, maybe, finally, inside was a single sentence. "We're sorry for your loss, but this is your life now." That was it. No "how are you?" No "do you need help?" No "we're here if you ever need family." Just a reminder, you made your choice. Don't expect anything from us. I kept that letter in the same box as her wedding RSVP, the one she never sent. Sometimes I wonder why I don't just throw it out. Maybe because part of me still wants proof that it happened, that the rejection was real, that I didn't imagine it. Because when pain is invisible, people think you're exaggerating. But when it's written in ink, postmarked and dated, it's harder to deny. Despite everything, I poured every drop of energy I had into being a good mum. I made pancake animals on Sundays, even if I hadn't slept. I read to Nia every night, even when my voice was hoarse from intubating patients all day. I sat through parent meetings and dance recitals and art shows, smiling like I wasn't carrying a mountain on my back. Nia deserved more than what I had growing up. She deserved warmth, affection, safety. When she turned 6, I found her in the living room with one of Christopher's old notebooks. She was scribbling furiously, her tongue sticking out in concentration. I asked, "What you writing, baby?" She looked up, eyes shining, and said, "A story about a girl who lives in the sky and builds her own world." I smiled. "That sounds amazing. Can I read it when you're done?" She nodded and said, "It's for you, Mommy, because I want to build a world where no one's ever alone." And I swear, right then, I almost dropped the plate I was holding, because I realized she'd been watching me. She felt it. Even if I never said a word, even if I always smiled, she knew. Kids always know. Over the next few years, writing became her everything. She wrote after school, she wrote on weekends, she filled journals with entire universes. At 8, she asked me how to send a book to a publisher. I laughed at first, thought it was just a phase, but then I read her manuscript. It wasn't a phase, it was a gift. The language, the pacing, the heart. This wasn't kid stuff, this was real storytelling. This was her way of healing, and mine too. We sent the book out with a simple letter. "Hi, my daughter wrote this, she's 8, please read it." Most publishers ignored us. But one small indie house in Virginia responded. They loved it, they wanted to publish it. When I told Nia, she jumped into my arms and yelled, "I'm going to be an author!" And in that moment, I wasn't a grieving widow or a rejected daughter. I was a proud mum watching her child shine. We launched The Girl Who Built the Sky the next spring. It didn't just do well, it exploded. Articles, book clubs, school visits. For the first time in a long time, we weren't just surviving, we were living. But deep down, I knew. The brighter Nia shined, the more likely certain people would come crawling out of the dark, people who'd once turned their backs, people who'd suddenly remember they had a granddaughter. And as proud as I was of her, part of me was already bracing for the storm. Because sometimes, when you finally build your own world, the ones who once tore yours down come back to claim a piece of it. The invitation came in early November. A voicemail from my mother. Her voice was shaky, unfamiliar, like she was reaching through a memory, not a phone line. "Rebecca, we'd like to see you. Maybe it's time. Come for Thanksgiving." Or, "Bring Nia." I sat there holding my phone like it had just turned to glass in my hand. It had been 8 years since that woman last said my name out loud. And now she wanted a reunion, just like that? I stared at the screen, half waiting for a second message to come in, something colder, more familiar, but it never came. I spent the next few nights pacing the kitchen. Nia watched me from the table. Her pencil paused mid-sentence. "Mommy, are we going?" I wanted to say no. Every instinct in my body screamed to say no. But then I looked at her, this 11-year-old girl who still believed the world could change if you just gave people a second chance, and a small part of me still wanted to believe that too. So we went. We drove 2 hours to the red brick house where I grew up, the one with the white shutters, the perfect lawn, and the silent living room where dreams went to die. The moment we stepped inside, I knew we were strangers there. Everything looked the same, and yet everything felt smaller, colder, more performative. My mother hugged me, but it felt like shaking hands with a mirror. My father nodded. "Glad you came." Even that sounded like a rehearsal line. Nia, wearing her best green dress, held my hand tightly. Her curls were pinned up neatly, her smile soft but nervous. She was trying so hard to be good, to be likable, to belong. The table was set like a magazine spread: turkey, stuffing, wine, centerpieces. My brother Ben and his wife were there with their 2 blonde children, Ava and Caleb. Clinking forks, polite laughter, shallow questions. They talked about Caleb's soccer team and Ava's piano recital. They didn't ask Nia a single thing, not about her books, not about her school, not even her favourite food. She sat there, eating in silence, smiling politely, and I could see it, her heart folding in on itself, trying not to take up space. When dessert came, my mother passed around gifts to the grandchildren. Ava got a custom art set, Caleb got a smartwatch. Nia? She got an old picture book, creased and yellowing, something I'm pretty sure came from the attic. She held it in her lap, smiling anyway. My chest tightened. After dinner, the kids went outside for a scavenger hunt. Nia asked if she could join. I nodded. Of course, baby. Go have fun. She ran out into the chilly evening, hair bouncing, notebook forgotten on her chair, and for the first time that day, she looked free. 10 minutes later, I heard yelling from the backyard, then crying. I rushed out the door, heart already pounding. Naya stood frozen by the swing set, holding a small toy in her hand, a glittery unicorn keychain. Ava was snatching it from her. Caleb yelled, "That's for real family, not for you!" Before I could get to her, my mother stormed across the yard, face flushed. She grabbed Nia's wrist so fast the toy dropped. And then, through clenched teeth, she hissed, "Don't you dare touch what's not yours, you ungrateful little mixed-blood brat!" Time stopped. The backyard went silent. Nia stared at her grandmother like she couldn't understand the language being spoken. Her wrist still dangling in that grip, her breath caught in her throat. I ran. I didn't speak. I shoved my mother's hand off my daughter's arm so hard she stumbled back. I turned to Nia, pulled her close. "Are you hurt?" I asked. She shook her head, but her eyes, God, her eyes, looked shattered. Then I stood up, looked around. My father, standing by the grill, said nothing. Ben stared at his shoes. No one said a word, so I said it for them. "You all stood here and let that happen to an 11-year-old girl who has done nothing but love this family from a distance. She writes books for children. She sends hope into the world. And you just broke something in her that she might never get back." I looked my mother dead in the eye. "You don't get to touch her. You don't get to talk to her. And you sure as hell don't get to call her that." I turned to Nia, bent down and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "We're leaving, baby, because this isn't family. Family doesn't bruise you just to feel powerful." She nodded, wiping her cheek. "I just wanted to play," she whispered. "I know," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong." And we left. No goodbyes. No looking back. That night, while Nia slept curled beside me, I sat in the dark and cried. Not just for what happened, but for what I'd finally seen with perfect clarity. My daughter wasn't the one who didn't belong there. I was. And maybe I'd been an outsider in that house since the day I was born. It had been 1 week since Thanksgiving. 1 week since my mother grabbed my daughter's wrist and called her a mixed-blood brat in front of an entire backyard full of family. 1 week since I looked my own parents in the eye and realized they never saw Nia as family. And maybe they never really saw me either. I was still shaking from it, still rewinding every second of that night. Like maybe I missed something, some clue that warned me, some small sign that said, "Don't come, don't trust them, don't hope." But hope has a way of sneaking in when you least expect it. And sometimes it's the thing that hurts you most. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and froze. There they were, my parents, Martin and Teresa Hollis, standing on my porch like nothing had happened, like they hadn't watched my daughter be humiliated at their dinner, like they hadn't been silent, cold and complicit for the past 11 years. My mother wore a long wool coat, the kind she saved for church. My father looked older than I remembered, thinner, slower. "Rebecca," my mum said softly, "we came to talk, to see you and Nia." I stood there, hand on the doorframe, unsure whether to laugh or slam it shut. Behind me I heard small footsteps. Nia peeked around the hallway, eyes wide. She froze when she saw them, didn't run, didn't smile, just froze. My mother stepped forward. "Sweetheart," she cooed, "I've missed you so much." She bent down and opened her arms. "Give Grandma a hug?" Nia didn't move. My mum leaned in anyway and kissed her on the forehead, and I swear I saw my daughter flinch. I gently placed my hand on Nia's shoulder. "Go upstairs, baby," I said. "Mommy needs a minute." She nodded and disappeared without a word. When she was gone, I turned back to the couple in my doorway and asked, "Why are you here?" My mother looked nervous. "To make amends, to apologize. We said things we didn't mean." I stared at her. The woman who once sent me a letter saying, "This is your life now," after I buried my husband, the woman who tapped my child, then said nothing for days. "You didn't just say things you didn't mean," I replied. "You meant every word. You meant it when you slapped her. You meant it when you let your grandchildren mock her. You meant it when you let her walk away with bruises and silence." My father shifted. "We made a mistake. We see that now." "No," I said, voice steady. "You saw her name in the newspaper. That's what changed." And that was the truth. After her first book took off, Nia became a name, especially among young readers. She had fans, social media buzz, and just last month a TV network announced they were optioning her story into a series. It was everywhere. 11-year-old author turns grief into magic. The Girl Who Built the Sky sells 2 million copies, and suddenly family who hadn't spoken to us in a decade remembered how to dial our number. My mother sighed. "Rebecca, we're not here because of that, but well, things haven't been easy." She paused, then glanced at my dad. "We're struggling. Dad's pension isn't what it used to be. Your brothers had layoffs. We thought maybe you and Nia could help, even just a little." There it was. The real reason. The apology was a doorbell. The hug was bait. This was the ask. I felt something inside me harden. For years, I blamed myself for the distance. I thought maybe I hadn't tried hard enough. Maybe if I wrote more, called more, forgave more. But this moment, this quiet, awkward transaction disguised as reconciliation, it showed me who they really were, and who I no longer was. "You're not getting near her again," I said. "Not now, not ever." My mother blinked. "Rebecca, you don't get to hurt a child and then show up because she's profitable. You don't get to slap her, then post her books on Facebook like proud grandparents. You don't get to sell the version of love you refuse to live." My father clenched his jaw. "You're being dramatic." I laughed bitterly. "No, I'm being a mother." I stepped forward, just enough to let the cold rain hit my arms. "Let me be clear. We don't owe you money, we don't owe you access, and we sure as hell don't owe you forgiveness just because you're getting old and broke." My mum's face crumpled. "Please, we just want to be a family again." "You had 11 years to be a family," I said, "and you used every minute to make sure we knew we weren't wanted." Then I closed the door. Upstairs, Nia was sitting on her bed, legs crossed, journal open. She looked up at me. "Are they gone?" I nodded. "They said sorry?" she asked. "They said a lot of things," I replied, "but they didn't mean any of it." Nia nodded slowly. "Okay." Then she smiled faintly. "I wrote a new chapter today. Want to read it with me?" I sat beside her, pulled the blanket over us, and said, "Always." That night, as we read her words together, words filled with hope and castles and flying kids with moonlight in their veins, I knew we'd already built the only family we needed, the kind that didn't knock when success arrived, because it never left in the first place. Some doors don't slam shut, they just stop being walked through. That's what it felt like after my parents left our porch for the last time. No screaming, no final confrontation. Just the quiet certainty that we were done chasing love where it didn't live. And for the first time in my life, that quiet felt like peace. In the weeks that followed, life went back to its usual rhythm. I still worked shifts at the hospital, not because I needed to, but because helping people reminded me who I was. Nia kept writing, filling notebook after notebook with characters who stood up when no one else did. She started working on a new project. This time, not fantasy. It was called The Girl with No Grandparents, and it was raw, honest, brave. "I want kids like me to know they're not alone," she told me one night as we sat under a blanket, cocoa in hand. They deserve to feel enough, even if the people who should have loved them didn't. I didn't have words. I just kissed her forehead and said, "You are so much more than enough." The book came out when she turned 12. It wasn't just successful, it became a movement. Teachers reached out, kids wrote letters, single parents sent us messages saying, "Thank you for telling our story." A school in South Africa even started a literacy program using Nia's books as core material. We cried when we read the email together, because that little girl who once clutched a glittery unicorn in fear was now building a world where no child would have to flinch again. We never heard from my parents again. No apology, no explanation, no surprise. Ben and his family sent a holiday card that year. Just a photo, no message. I tossed it in the trash without opening it. Some people only love you when it's convenient. Some only want to be family when they see headlines. But love, the real kind, is built in the quiet. In bedtime hugs, in lunchbox notes, in standing up when no one else will. Every night now, before bed, Nia and I have a ritual. She writes a line, I read a line. Sometimes it's silly, sometimes it's beautiful, but always it's ours. One night she wrote, "Blood can abandon you, but love doesn't need DNA." I think that was the moment I realised we didn't lose a family. We built one. There's this quote I keep taped above my desk. It says, "The people who break you don't get to define you. The ones who stay do." And for me, that's Nia. So if you're watching this, if you've ever felt abandoned by the very people who were supposed to love you the most, let me ask you this. Who's the person that stayed? Who showed up when everyone else vanished? Tell me in the comments. Tell the world, because sometimes naming the love that stayed is how we finally let go of the ones that didn't.